My dear love, today is the day I finally find the courage to tell you everything that has been weighing on my heart, everything that has kept me silent and distant, everything that has made my absence feel confusing and unfair to you. I know you've been wondering what has been happening, and I can only imagine how strange all of this must have appeared from your perspective, how out of character it must have felt, especially considering how close we have always been and how natural communication once felt between us. For so long, I've struggled with how to explain what has been going on inside me, how to put into words the worry, fear, and confusion that kept me from reaching out even when my heart was begging me to do so. I didn't want to burden you with things that felt unclear even to me, things that felt tangled and difficult to make sense of. But now I realize that keeping all of this inside has only made the distance between us grow heavier. You deserve to know what has been going on in my mind, why I withdrew the way I did, and why it felt impossible for me to speak sooner. This message isn't easy for me to write, and to be honest, I've hesitated countless times before trying to put it into words. Even now, I feel at a loss, unsure of how to begin, unsure of how to explain everything in a way that will help you understand without worrying or misunderstanding my intentions. But what I feel for you, the care, the respect, the connection, means too much for me to keep hiding behind silence, so I'm asking you to give me a few moments of your time, to hear me out all the way through, because what I need to share has been pressing on me for longer than you know. For quite some time, every time I attempted to reach out to you, something inside me tightened, like an invisible weight pulling me back. It felt as if the moment I tried to speak, to send a message, to show even a hint of vulnerability, something would interrupt, sometimes an overwhelming wave of anxiety, sometimes a sudden worry that I couldn't logically explain, sometimes a feeling that reaching out might trigger consequences I didn't feel ready to face. These moments weren't simple distractions or ordinary delays, they felt like emotional blockades rising out of nowhere, almost as if my own mind was constructing barriers faster than I could tear them down. At first I told myself it was just stress, that life was overwhelming me and making things seem more dramatic than they were. But the more it happened, the more those emotional interruptions began to feel like a pattern, one I didn't understand and didn't know how to talk about. It was as though each attempt to connect with you triggered a sense of unease or threat, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. I want to be clear, I'm not claiming anything impossible or factual about the world outside us, only that this is genuinely how it felt inside me, overwhelming and consuming, like the universe kept throwing emotional barricades in my path every time your name appeared on my screen. As the pattern repeated, I began interpreting these reactions as if there was some kind of interference surrounding my efforts to reach you, almost like a barrier or presence that made me believe that reaching out might somehow bring complications, misunderstandings, or emotional consequences that neither of us deserved. I know that may sound strange from the outside, but feelings sometimes take on a life of their own, especially when stress, worry, and the fear of vulnerability start to mix. It was never that someone was objectively watching me or tracking my actions in a literal sense, more that it felt like every move I made was monitored by the echoes of my own anxiety, as if a part of me was constantly checking, questioning, doubting, analyzing every step before I even took it. The idea of contacting you began to feel heavy, almost dangerous, not because of anything real in the world, but because my mind had convinced itself that reaching out might create turmoil or bring about emotional consequences that I wasn't prepared to handle. That inner fear began to feel like an unseen third presence in my life, not an actual person, but a metaphorical shadow made up of doubt, fear, and past experiences that had planted themselves deep inside me. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it grew, whispering that contacting you wasn't safe, that the timing was wrong, that something unpredictable might follow. I didn't want to believe that these feelings meant anything serious, and for a long time I dismissed them as random bursts of stress that would pass. But as days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months, I began seeing the pattern everywhere. Every time I lifted my phone and tried to type a message to you, some part of me froze, not because of you, never because of you, but because of the landscape inside my own thoughts that had become harder and harder to navigate. It felt like I was constantly being pulled between my desire to reach out and the weight of internal warnings telling me to stay silent. And the more I hesitated, the more guilt and confusion built up inside me, making it even harder to speak. Eventually I reached a point where staying quiet felt like the only option that wouldn't trigger those overwhelming internal alarms. Silence became a way to keep myself steady, to prevent the emotional chaos that seemed to erupt whenever I tried to reconnect with you. It wasn't what I wanted, not even close, but it felt like the only thing that kept my world from tipping over. I need you to understand that my silence was never, ever a reflection of my feelings toward you. It wasn't disinterest, it wasn't avoidance, and it wasn't indifference. It was fear. It was confusion. It was a storm within me that I didn't know how to control, and the only way I felt I could keep things stable was by stepping back until I understood what was happening inside me. I didn't want to drag you into something that felt so chaotic and unclear, something I couldn't explain without sounding lost inside my own mind. But over time, the weight of not telling you the truth, of leaving you in the dark, began haunting me more than the fear that kept me silent. So here I am, opening all of this up to you even though it scares me, even though I still don't fully understand why my emotional landscape reacted the way it did. All I know is that the distance has not been my choice. If anything, it has been the last thing I ever wanted. You mean more to me than you know, and the thought of you feeling hurt or confused because of my absence has been one of the hardest parts of carrying all of this alone. So please believe me when I say this, the silence wasn't because of you. It was because I was trying, in the only way I knew how, to keep things safe, emotionally safe, mentally safe, stable enough that I wouldn't fall apart while trying to reach for you. I needed time to understand myself, to understand the fear and pressure that seemed to rise every time I thought of contacting you, and to find the courage to finally speak through that fear instead of hiding behind it. This message is my first step toward breaking that silence. I'm not saying everything will be perfect immediately, or that I suddenly have all the answers. But I want you to know the truth behind my absence, to see that it came from a place of deep care rather than neglect or disinterest. I want you to know that even in my silence, you were on my mind every day, and the distance has felt like something I never wanted but didn't know how to challenge. You deserve honesty, transparency, and the reassurance that you were never the cause of my withdrawal. I hope that by sharing this with you, I can start rebuilding the trust and closeness that my silence may have damaged. I hope you can see that behind all of this confusion, my intentions were never to hurt you. They were to protect the connection between us in the only way I could manage at the time. And now, even though I still feel the echoes of that fear, I'm choosing to speak, because you matter too much for me to keep hiding. Please understand that everything I've done, even the silence, came from a place of wanting to keep us safe, steady, and protected in ways I didn't know how to articulate until now. I hope this explanation brings clarity, and I hope it opens a door for us to communicate again, with more honesty, more understanding, and more compassion than before. My distance was never born from lack of care, it was born from the depth of it. And now, I'm finally ready to share that truth with you.